Hello, Graham.
Hello.
It's Michael
Hi.
Purse. It's Michael Purse calling from Adelaide in Australia. How you doing?
Michael, how are you?
I'm very well.
I'm good, thanks. How are you doing?
Great, great. My sincere apologies for my mucking you around with the time zone.
Oh, don't worry. I know it's confusing sometimes.
Are you ready to go?
Yes, sir.
Alrighty. All right, Graham Gouldman, a great pleasure to talk to you. Welcome to Sitting in a Bar in Adelaide, and great news for 10cc fans in Australia that you are coming back to see us once again.
Yes, and we're really looking forward to it. We've always loved coming to Australia, and it's been a long time, actually. It's 2003 was the last time that we were over.
And as you say, Australia has always had a place in its heart for 10cc.
Yes, yeah. I remember the first time we came over, I think it was in '78. We got a tremendous reception, and we were actually due to come back in '79, I think, but unfortunately Eric Stewart had a very bad car accident, and that stopped a tour of Australia and Japan as well.
That's right, I remember that tour well. I saw the band, and that was resulted in the Live and Let Live LP that people may remember. But one thing I remember from that tour is what a hot band you had, Graham, with Paul Burgess and Rick Fenn and Tony O'Malley and Stuart Tosh. Yeah,
fantastic band. Of course, both Paul Burgess and Rick Fenn are still with me on the upcoming tour. So the band is sounding better than ever. That's not just me saying that; it's just everybody says it.
Well, Paul Burgess in particular is a wild man drummer. He is fantastic, and I'm looking forward to see him playing again. Indeed.
Well, he's a fantastic drummer for everybody, and he's a perfect drummer for us. Of course, both he and Rick have been on the road with us for so many years, and also in the studio. So they couldn't be better, really.
And I guess folks all around the world, in Australia included, will certainly know 10cc from I'm Not In Love and the period of original soundtrack with the four of you guys. But for me, the golden period of 10cc was actually after Kevin and Lowell had left the band, and you brought Paul in, and you and Eric made Deceptive Bends. In my humble opinion, that is one of the greatest LPs ever made.
Well, thank you very much. We're also very, very proud of it. There was a bit of a backlash against Eric and I think, with Kevin and Lowell leaving. We didn't make them go back away. They went of their own accord. But after a lot of discussion, Eric and I decided we should keep the name and carry on as 10cc. And I think that album, proves that we did it very well. Obviously, the dynamic of the band changed. It was 50% of the team, and it was different after that. But I think it was, different in a good way.
And I guess the thing that people maybe aren't so familiar with of the period before that with 10cc is the four of you guys were all not just accomplished songwriters, but could all sing lead vocals. You could all take lead vocal if need be, which is a very rare thing in a band.
Yeah, it is. I'm not sure whether in the long run that created a sort of identity problem, but the fact of the matter was, all we cared about was making the most of each song. And it didn't really matter who the singer was. We just always chose the best man for the job. So there was no, well, I'm the singer, or I'm the bass player, I'm the lead guitarist. And if you look at the credits, you'll see that, we do chop and change, not only lead vocals, but, guitar playing and bass sometimes. And
as we spoke about just a moment ago, that when the two guys left 10cc, I do recall even here in Australia that there was the music press just went crazy on what you and Eric were planning to do with 10cc, but you did indeed prove them wrong on more than just the one occasion with Deceptive Bends, because Bloody Tourist, the follow up, was a mighty record, and as the tour of Australia proved that the band was fantastic live.
Yeah. Well, I think both those albums that you mentioned really did, prove that Eric and I were more than capable of, carrying the name 10cc.
And I would guess folks in Australia are familiar with your career in different aspects, but and I guess a lot of people would be familiar with the songwriting work you did very very early on in your career with the likes of the Yardbirds. And I remember reading a 10cc bio when I was, I guess, a teenager, that described how you were a songwriter for hire in the States, and I remember thinking, what a fantastic job, what a dream job that must be. And it was years later that I read an interview that you did, and that you mentioned that was one of the more miserable parts of your life. So it's interesting how an outsider looking in can see something totally the wrong way around.
Well, I mean, there was one period, I think that's what you're referring to, when I went to America to work for the Cabinet's Cats organisation, and they were best known for, creating bubblegum, which you'd think might be exactly the opposite of what I did. But I'd sort of had quite a lot of hits in the mid-'60s, and towards the sort of latter end of the '60s, things were a bit quiet for me, and these guys wanted to sort of have a little more kudos attached to their organisation, and they asked me if I'd like to come over and, write with their writers. And I've always been the sort of person that I usually say yes to something, because you never know what good will come of it. And in fact, although artistically for me it was a bit of a low point, in a way it was one of the factors that helped create 10cc, because I was working in New York, fed up working there, and I'd written quite a lot of songs. I said, well, I don't want to do the demos or records of these songs here. I want to take them back to the UK, and because I'm involved with a studio there, and also I've got friends who are musicians, and I'd like to do the records there. And they agreed to that, and so that was just prior to us forming 10cc. And on the demos and records that we made for them, there was myself, Kevin, Eric, and Lol. So you could say that in a way, that was one of the factors that helped to form the band.
And the studio you refer to was Strawberry Studios, it was, yes? Yeah,
that was a studio originally set up by Eric Stewart and a guy called Peter Tattersall, and then they needed some more money putting into it, and I got involved in it. And of course that became our home. And, that studio was an absolutely vital part of everything that 10cc did.
And you can hear that in the records of that time. The records that 10cc made through the whole of the 70s in that studio have, to me, I guess, a similar feel to the records of that time made in Abbey Road. There's just there's something about them that still sounds, that test of time, they still sound absolutely lovely when you go back and listen to them.
Well, they've got a unique atmosphere, as happens with each studio, even though you might not be able to put your finger on exactly what it is. There's just a feeling that you get. I mean, of course, those are the days when we were, as much as possible, recorded in the studio, playing together. It was also, we only had, we started off, I think, with 4 tracks, then 8 tracks, then 16, then 24 tracks. So there was a limitation on what you could do. That, of course, affected your whole approach to recording, in that you couldn't say, well, let's put on 6 acoustic guitars. You'd have to have one really fantastic sounding one. You had to think very much about, make a lot of decisions early on in the record-making process. In a way you could say there's too much freedom now, and in sort of restrictions can help you artistically. But it was a whole different era, and the songs were different, and also we had the freedom to do exactly what we wanted to do. We were completely self-contained, including the fact that Eric was an engineer, so we didn't need anybody else in the studio. We had no input from the record companies, pretty much whatsoever. I mean, we would present them with the albums. They didn't come down and go, oh, well, boys, I think you need this sort of song or that sort of song. We didn't need anybody in the studio. We just presented what we did.
how do you think that period of your career is remembered? I seem to what I read and what I see that 10cc from that period is remembered for the great songs and the great recording and musicianship of the band. But I think for me a significant factor that I loved about the band and still do, that I think may be a bit missed, is what a great sense of humour the band has. That lyrically the songs were just wonderful.
Yeah, well, yes, you're right. Yes, I mean the sort of sense of humour and the cleverness of the lyrics, will be known for that, as well as sort of, I think at the heart of 10cc of the original band is the diversity of characters, the different influences that we had that came together in such a great way. It's all, as with everything, it's all down to chemistry between people as to what makes it work and what it doesn't. But the fact is, we had our influences were as broad as very Jacques Brel or rather avant-garde sorts of music, down to classical music, down to pure pop, down to rhythm and blues. There was such a mixture of influences, and they all seemed to rub together very well.
Is it fair to say, from my observations, that your influence brought a lot of funk and reggae aspects to the band?
Sorry, there was influence.
Your influence that I hear in your solo work, there's a lot of that I can hear, a lot of reggae and a lot of funk influence. Did you bring that aspect to the band?
Well, yeah. Well, I think I started listening to ska and reggae music in the very early in the early '60s. I think we were all surrounded by that sort of music. I can't say that it was my input of that particularly, but I suppose that I always loved it. I mean, I always loved Burt Bacharach and Jimmy Webb and sort of very poppy type music. But the one thing that we were all heavily influenced by were the Beatles and the Beach Boys, and they first set the bar. And then people like Steely Dan. There are certain people that are sort of otherworldly in what they do, and those were the sort of heights we were really aiming for.
Oh, and achieved them indeed.
Thank you.
If I can just quickly touch on a couple of other things from your career that I'm really interested in. One of the things that one of my favourite records is a tune called "The KKK Took My Baby Away" by the Ramones, produced by your good self.
Yeah.
What a fantastic and when people see your name next to the name of the Ramones, they suddenly think, what's happening here? But as we mentioned before, the sense of humour with 10cc and yourself and the Ramones fits so well together.
Well, actually, the funny thing was, I wondered why they'd actually asked me to do it at all, and it was nothing to do with 10cc. What it was they loved, the British invasion. All the bands from the '60s. Rather the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, and also like people like the Yardbirds in particular. And it was what I wrote for the Yardbirds. That was the thing they were looking for, that I would bring to their table. But as I say, I even, when they told me that, and they also thought that their songs were similar to mine, I didn't quite see that. However, I thought, we should give it a go, and I was a little nervous about it, in that I was only worried that we were a mismatch. But quite often, mismatches get on very well together. But I did suggest that rather than us both committing ourselves to a whole album, we should, maybe just do 3 or 4 tracks and see how it goes, and then make a decision. And that's exactly what we did, and we enjoyed working with them, and we all decided that we would go ahead and do an album. So it was an interesting time. Poor Joey came over to we did all the tracks in New York, and I brought over to very conscientious and reliable. Not, I had I guess wrongly preconceived ideas that it was going to be a bit of a nightmare, but it wasn't at all. They were very, very good. And Joey was a wonderful character, a lovely person, and I've got lovely memories of him and taking him to various restaurants and meeting people, and everybody absolutely fell in love with him. And long after he was gone, we used to go into our local restaurants, and people would say, "Where's Joey? How's Joey?" Bring him back.
That's a wonderful story. Wonderful. And another aspect of your career that may be a little bit forgotten in Australia is the reasonably long and fruitful collaboration you had with Andrew Gould.
Yes. Actually, Andrew and I have just been this morning emailing each other. One of the I would say the happiest and musical periods of my life, both musically and personally. Andrew and I are great friends, and we had I like to say have really, a wonderful musical relationship. I loved all the Wax stuff, and it's funny, to go around doing, we did lots of gigs and everything. So many people come up and say, "I love the Wax stuff," and it was of an era, and I very rarely listen to what I've done, but of anything, I do dip into that stuff now and again, and it always makes me smile.
It's funny you should say that, because I popped American English on only in the last couple of days when I knew I was going to have a chat to you, and it did the same for me. I had a huge beam on the mush.
I agree. I have such great memories. And the thing that always strikes me is I obviously, I love writing with Andrew, but Andrew's voice, he's got such a great voice. I love his voice. It's so expressive and emotional. So, anyway, we are threatening to get back together again.
Wonderful
at
stuff.
some point. It would be just as a songwriting team, but it's just a pleasure of making music with him, it'd be great.
And on the subject of collaborations, in recent years you've gotten back together with Kevin Godley, which after a very long absence.
Yeah, and that was also very, very, satisfying, and because he's also got a wonderful voice. I always liked his voice best of all in the band. A few years ago he contacted me because he wanted to get back into music and didn't want to do it on his own, and we had this, what we formed GG06, and we recorded about 5 tracks for that. Since he's moved out of the UK, and since he's moved, it's been a bit difficult to get together, but we do stay in contact with one another, and also, we do want to do something together. I'm sure that will happen.
Wonderful. Look forward to that. Well, as we said at the... At the start, there's a lot of 10cc fans in Australia, I'm sure, that are very happy to see you coming back to see us again. And I believe there's a new DVD in the wind.
Well, we did a DVD. We recorded a DVD of this band that's called Clever Clogs, and that's going to be. I'm sure will be. Well, I don't know. I assume it's on sale in Australia. But that we're very, very pleased with that. We spent a lot of time doing that, and that's a really good representation of the band as it is today.
Wonderful. I must admit I haven't seen it on sale in Australia, but hopefully the fact that you're coming out to see us will get some distribution.
Yes.
Happening.
I hope so. I hope someone's doing their job.
And so what can you have such a huge body of work, Graham? What can folks expect to see from your visit to see us in Australia?
I guess all the hits and more. The more being various album tracks that we do. Depending on the length of the show, there's something quite interesting that we do that came from our last British tour, where we didn't have a support act, and it always bothered me that we didn't have a support act. So I put myself up to do the support act, and it developed into a sort of like 25-minute set of me singing a few of the songs that I wrote in the 60s, But as I sort of opened it on my own, and then I brought in, like, Rick played with me on the next song, and then I brought in Nick to be on the next song, and the other guys. So that was a very nice way of featuring the songs that I did in the 60s, but that, you know, so that they're not included in the 10cc set as such, and that really worked very well. So there's a depending on how long we're doing, there's a very good possibility that we will be doing that as well.
That sounds absolutely wonderful. I'm sure fans would love to see that.
It works really well, because the songs, even though they're different, there's obviously a strand in them because, you know, I wrote them.
But also a lot of those songs are exceptionally well known and loved tunes. But a lot of people would not have had the joy of seeing you perform them.
Yeah, or neither do they know that I wrote them, which I wouldn't expect them to anyway. You know, not a lot of people know who wrote songs, but so it's a sort of added bonus. But I do make it very clear that I'm not doing some cover versions. I'm actually doing them because I wrote them.
So that makes me a nerd that knows far too much about who wrote songs, doesn't it?
Well,
yes.
Well, if you're a nerd, there's a lot of nerds.
All right, Graham, an absolute pleasure to say hello. Thank you very much for your time. It's been an absolute joy to talk to you.
Okay, Michael, nice to talk to you too.
And we look forward to seeing you in Australia.
Say hello to Jeff. Have you spoken to Jeff yet?
He's in town tomorrow. I'm hoping to see him before the show.
Okay, great. Well, if you'd send him my regards, if you can remember, that'd be great.
I will indeed. Before I go, can I get you to do a quick tag for my show?
Sure.
My show is called Sitting in a Bar in Adelaide.
Sitting in a bar in Adelaide?
Yes. If you can do me something along the lines of, this is Graham Gouldman from 10cc and you are listening to blah, 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 would be wonderful.
Yep. Hi, this is Graham Gouldman of 10cc and you're listening to Sitting in a Bar in Adelaide.
Thank you, Graham. As I said, a great pleasure, and I really appreciate your time, and I really look forward to seeing you in Adelaide.
Okay, see you at the gig. Okay.
All the best. Bye-bye, mate.
Thanks, Michael. Bye-bye.
Bye.